sales, and how many people don't realize that until you're actually in it.
That was probably my biggest wake-up call in my experience.
Critical skill set within business. And it's interesting that sales isn't really something that is recognized even as a profession.
Do not underestimate salesmanship and the skill and the intellectual capabilities that you need to do it.
So this week I've been thinking about, no matter whether you're starting up something small and meaningful or you're trying to scale something that's been going for a long time, my reflections this week have been about the fact that when you're in business, you're in sales. And how many people don't realize that until you're actually in it. So a lot of entrepreneurs are excited about the idea of being an entrepreneur because there's, some fantasy associated with that. But business really is about sales. It's about making as many sales as you can manage to deliver on. And so I thought today we could talk about what it means to be in sales.
Great, I completely agree. I have to say that was probably my biggest wake-up call in my experience, was this whole thing about suddenly you've got to put yourself out there and you've got to talk in a certain way to make sure that the person's understanding what you can do, how you can do it. And it takes a lot of confidence, and it takes a lot of being in an uncomfortable situation, often if you're not naturally a salesperson. So if you're someone who is a window cleaner, for example, and you suddenly knocking on doors saying, "Can I clean your windows?" I'm sure there's got to be a much better way of saying that and pitching the services. And I think you're completely right. I think that is one area you just don't think about when you're starting.
So what you're touching on is also an important thing around the fact that we have businesses that are service-based and product-based, and actually how sales is quite different depending on what your business is actually doing. Are you offering a service or are you selling a product? And again, I've seen a lot of people come out of specialist spaces, even in your case, being a physio in the past and being a person in service delivery, and how that is what you've been trained to do. You know how to treat a patient, and how different it is when you're having to go out there and sell a service. Or whether you're good at cleaning windows, you can sell the fact that you're good at cleaning windows, but when you're wanting to build a business where you're not the window cleaner anymore, what does that look like? And that's actually a skill. It's a whole new skill set that most of the training that you would have gone through didn't provide you with the skill to sell a product or a service.
So you coach a lot of people who have their own businesses. So from your experience with the variety of people you've spoken to and businesses that you've analyzed and looked at in detail, what would you say is the hardest part of setting up a sales process? That's from the beginning. Like, where does someone even start?
Well, it's the fact that you have to have a process to start off with. So most people start their businesses in quite a haphazard way. It's kind of like, I know what I can do, I start doing it, I get a few clients or customers, I start doing it more, I realize I need to, well, I suppose if you're getting clients, you're doing something right in terms of selling, but the minute you're needing to scale it, a system is required. And so one of the key things is developing a sales process, as you suggested. And that means first understanding, again, your target market. Who are you trying to sell to start off with? Where are you going to get customers? Where are you going to find them if you are wanting to build a business from scratch? Understanding where a lot of your customers are already coming from, and then working towards finding more of those customers. So having a sales process and knowing exactly what you're going to do at each point also then for consistency's sake. So if you're not the only salesperson and you're scaling your business, you have multiple sales reps, all of them, you want them to be doing the same thing. So having a process in place is essential. Again, it depends on where you are in your business journey. If you're starting out, developing a sales process to start off with would be the ideal, but many people get into business, start selling, but don't really have a process. And so if you're starting up, that would be one of the primary activities to think about, is what process you want to put in place so that you follow a consistent, regular way of selling.
Okay, so let's take that first step that you've talked about, which is identifying your audience or your ideal customer. If we had to go into detail with that, what would you say? Okay, so where do you even want to start?
Let's take the window cleaning service as an example. You'd ideally want to identify who your ideal customer would be. So do you want to be cleaning windows of cars, or do you want to be cleaning windows of office blocks, or do you want to be cleaning windows of houses? All of those specifics would determine your niche and what area you would then start marketing to. So if you're doing cleaning windows of houses, you may be targeting maybe the homeowner. So then how would you get a referral for a homeowner? You would potentially look at building a strategic partnership with a real estate agent, or if you are wanting to clean office block windows, you would need to identify perhaps landlords or body corporates or businesses that are going to give you access to the target that you're wanting to service. So it's first identifying what exactly the service you're wanting to offer. Most businesses who say they do window cleaning don't do any window cleaning because they're not clear enough about what kind of window cleaning they do. So it's being quite specific about your target market, and then identifying where you would get access to the gatekeeper, the person who would give you access to first to be able to do the sale. Then it's a matter of how do you get those people's contact details? How do you get in touch with those people to at least begin to have a conversation with them, to start your sales process? So it's identifying who they are and then how you would get access to them. And there's a whole list of strategies that you would then start to make use of to actually get access to someone who you don't have an existing relationship with.
Okay, so there's a lot of being proactive here. So your sales process starts with identifying who you're going to be servicing or selling to, and then making sure that you're really working hard to get to the people who can make decisions and who are going to be wanting that kind of service. So when you were talking here, the first thing that came to mind for me was old age homes. Often people are not able to do their own window cleaning and stuff like that. So I would then go approach the manager of the old age home, chat to them about this is what I can do, this is what it will cost, and then try and get some sort of monthly recurring revenue in some capacity. That's what I'll probably try and do, or at least return every 3 months or so to do the same people's windows, just to make sure that there's some sort of continuity there.
So what you're touching on now is actually your business model. So again, that would come through in your sales process, is what service are you offering? Are you offering an ad hoc service, or are you as a business owner wanting to build a subscription model of people who are regularly paying you in a consistent manner? So again, that's part of the development of the business, is for you to identify how are you going to make a consistent income out of your business. And that then becomes an aspect of your sales process, because you're then selling a solution that is also useful to the consumer or the customer. So you would then in your sales process be saying, this is how we're going to service you that's different from any other service provider out there. This is how it's beneficial, and these are the advantages of using us as opposed to someone else. That kind of comes in later in the sales process. of what benefits you're selling to your potential customer. So understanding your business model and how you want to make money is critical in terms of what you put into your sales process and where you then mention some of those things. So it's interesting that you've gone to that place and in your thinking, because it's a very important part to think about before you start selling.
So let's go deeper into the strategic partnership that you've mentioned. Can you talk a bit more about that?
So it's a particular marketing strategy. So we're talking about sales today, but it's intrinsically linked to the marketing machine that we build. So in order to make a sale, you need to have made your product conscious in the minds of people, and how you do that is through marketing. So we employ multiple marketing strategies in order to make the sale. If you think about it in a way, the marketing strategy is the sign that says, come to my store. The sales process is when you meet them at the door and you explore which product they're going to buy within the store. And so a strategic partnership is actually a marketing activity in order to get to the point of sale. So how that works is you would want to find someone who has an existing database or a potential market for your services. And usually you would identify that through, I suppose, customers that have different interests but would potentially speak to your target market. So you mentioned a strategic partner could be an old age home. There's already a database of individuals within that grouping that would all need your services. Another way to think about it is, if I want to clean windows for a bigger business park, there may be multiple business owners within that business park. So I would go and speak to the host or the person who's holding all of those potential customers within a database or within a particular grouping. And it's to build the relationship with the partner, the strategic partner, or the beneficiary of the service. So it's not just one, you're not just trying to market to one customer. You're looking for groupings of customers under a banner or within a community. So another way to think about it is, if, let's say, for example, I have a beauty salon and that's the business that I'm running, I would explore a strategic partnership with a hairdresser, for example, because all of the customers that would come to do skin treatments and body therapy would potentially also be doing treatments for their hair. And so it's identifying which of the service providers, like hairdressers, would have a database of people that I could then also get access to.
So you mentioned that sales is very sort of connected to your business model. Can you talk a bit more about that? So I'm starting my window cleaning business, and I've got to sort of unpack a system of trying to get my sales going and understand what kind of business I want to be running at the same time. So what else? What do I need to focus on next?
That goes back to, I suppose, very, very important foundational components of your business. So before you start running your business, you want to think about what is the ultimate goal of your business? What are you wanting to achieve in starting this business? So most people start their businesses usually with a basic survival goal. It's like, I need to make money. How am I going to make money? And so it's often a kind of busyness goal. You end up running a business, but it's really just about finding ways to get busy so that you can make money, so that you can pay the bills. Ideally, you want to start your business with the end in mind. So this idea of, when would my business be finished? What would it look like when I am done with my business, or when my business is working without me? Ultimately, you want your business to be something that gives you more life, more time, more money, and therefore more freedom. It's why most people want to leave employment and start their own businesses because you want more life, you want more choice. But if you don't think about what that business model will look like at the end, it's unlikely that you will build towards that. Most of the time, people just build more employment opportunities for themselves. And I'm touching on this now because it in the way that you set up your business is how it will continue. And so it's really important to think about, what is it that I want my business to be selling in 5 to 10 years from now? And how can I start doing that right from the beginning? And so thinking about, let's use the window cleaning service as a solution or as an option. I want to have 5 branches in 5 different cities cleaning windows at this margin. I want to be making this much profit every year off of this business. So if I understand what that profit margin needs to look like, then I can start building a system and a product that works me towards that outcome. That will then, in a way, that will then inform what your sales process looks like, what you are trying to sell right from the beginning, and what you are building over time to get to that point.
So if we had to physically write out a sales process, what kind of words and units or sections should we be putting into a sales process?
The sales process always starts with your database. So who are you selling to? And then how are you going to make them conscious of your product or your service? So making customers, potential customers, conscious of that is a marketing activity. And there are multiple different marketing strategies. So in the sales process, there is your potential customer or a database of people who you will communicate with. Then there's the conscious making process, which is the marketing aspects. And there's direct marketing, digital, all the different types of marketing. And then once you have a customer that has raised their hand going, I'm interested in this, then the sales process begins, because then you have someone at the door of your store. From that point, there are a number of steps depending on the product or service in the way that you engage with the customer to help them to make an informed decision about buying. So sales isn't really a forceful coercion. It's really a way of educating consumers or customers about how the product is going to help them. And then it's about helping them to buy something that they actually want. They just didn't know they needed it. So, and there are a number of steps in that. And that requires, I think, a more nuanced approach depending on the product or service.
What would you say are the most common mistakes that people make in their sales process?
Well, I'd want to actually put that back in your court and go, as you've run a successful business and are starting another business now, what are some of the things you've come up with or come up against in your process of sales that have been like, oh, I want to change that, or I'd like to do this differently?
I think in my case, the difference was people generally understand what physio is and does, and with business technologies that are using AI and automations, people don't understand. So my sales process is very visual now. So when we meet with a business owner, we have maps of systems of how it would take you from A to B. So it's very visual with a detailed explanation in very normal like language. We use very simple language, not very technical language. So I would say that that's one of the biggest things. It was the change for me in the sales process has been very much focusing on making sure that potential clients understand what it is that we would be building for them.
So what you're touching on here is really important. When we're starting a business in a context where the product or service is already known, it's already conscious in the mind of the consumer. The sales process is different to when you're launching a product that is unknown in the market, that is a new technology or a new system or something that consumers haven't used before, or doesn't even have a name sometimes. And so depending on, again, the product or service that you're launching into the market, there's a different sales process required depending on how known this product is in the mind of the consumer, how easily accessible it is to the consumer. And so most sales processes require some level of education. And that's again where marketing comes in. Marketing educates the consumer about the need, the value, the advantages, and the sales process continues with that until the consumer has enough confidence and trust that the product that they are going to buy is going to meet their need and solve one of their problems. And so a lot of sales error comes in when you're not helping the customer to understand how the product is going to meet a pain point or a problem that they're trying to solve. And rather it's just a good idea that you're trying to shove down someone's throat.
Okay, so that's a common mistake that people are making, that they're not solving problems. Is that they're not communicating the fact that they're solving a problem? It's the communication about that. Okay.
Most people start a business because of a personal need. So, you might start washing windows because you realize, I don't have time to wash my windows and I wish someone could do that for me, and therein lies the business opportunity. It's usually a pain point or a frustration, or in your case a desire to grow or learn, that a business opportunity becomes available. And so it's really tapping into what problem am I solving for myself in designing this product or offering this service, and then how do I communicate that to the consumer so that it doesn't feel like they're being sold. It's really about the pain point or the problem that's being solved or alleviated in some way.
I think you're touching on a really important point, though, is that you can't start a business based on your own personal interest, because you need to know that there's demand out there for what it is you're going to be doing. And so the sales process must take that into consideration, the demand of the product or services that you're wanting to put out there.
Absolutely. And I think that's often what happens is people start businesses because of an interest or, curiosity. And, there may be a very small niche for that kind of thing, but whether that's going to be very profitable or not is debatable. So I think that's part of understanding, competitor analysis, doing all the work in research and understanding the market before you go to market. And that also requires a process of testing and measuring. You can't know unless you've tried something. And so there's also risk involved in the beginning. But the sales process is usually once you've tried and tested. So it's product development, going into a prototype phase where you're testing it in the market, getting feedback, tweaking it, and then, even from a pricing point of view, testing the price. Is it something that people can afford at this price point? Is it, are people willing to part with their money for this thing at this price? All of that comes into the testing phase before you've refined a sales process that, is repeatable and scalable. So, and again, when you're in prototype phase of your business, you really are taking risks to see if this thing works or not. And sometimes that, that sales process is just an initial attempt, and the sales process gets tweaked and improved and modified over time until you've got a system that really works.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about what it takes to set up the process and set up your business. What about the human aspect of selling? What's the psychology of sales? What what advice would you give to someone who has not worked in a sales role before, and now they need to go out there and speak to people? What kind of tips would you give?
I mean, there's a whole 12 months of masterclasses you can do in terms of refining all of that. But I think on a very high level, one of the critical things about being good at sales is understanding how to communicate with your consumer, and recognizing that consumers come from different positions. They have different ways of interpreting information. So each sales interaction requires a kind of emotional intelligence around what is going on in that consumer and how do I communicate with them. So becoming more astute in terms of people dynamics, being able to understand, am I meeting with someone who's more social or more task oriented, and how do I communicate with them more directly or in a more sort of conversational way. So the sales process needs to incorporate an element of understanding some of the psychology of the potential customer you're talking to, and that requires learning. So becoming an astute business owner requires a process of learning how to communicate, how to offer something that lands in the mind of the consumer based on their structure. And that takes some time to get really good at. And there are apps like Crystal Knows where you can do a quick, understanding of the personality and how to sell to that personality. There is technology out there that can help you develop that skill set and also give you very quick fixes to a meeting with this customer. This is how they show up in all their socials. How can I then approach this customer based on what I know about them? So that's another aspect of sales, is doing a lot of research prior to meeting with your customer to really understand them before you meet with them, and be able to again target your communication based on what you already know about them. About if it's B2B, you want to understand their business and where their potential pain points are, or if it's B2C, it's probably a little more difficult to get clarity on that particular customer. But there are specific things that you can pick up on in, bodily cues, how they move their body, what language they use. But that requires a lot of learning. So I would say one of the main areas of advice around sales is recognize that you have to develop the skill set. And there's a whole host of skills required to be good at sales. And it is an identity shift. So in order to change the way you see yourself and the way that you come across, again, requires development. So actually taking the time to do some sales training and develop your head knowledge, your understanding, a sort of cognitive recognition of what this process looks like, and then practicing it. If I were to say to you, okay, go and become a tennis player, you'd have to first study the game a bit, figure out what tools you need, then get a coach, go and practice the physical and mindset things that are required to play the game, then start playing the game, find a team, get into some tournaments before you're really good at being a tennis player. The same thing applies to sales. It's a skill set. And so if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's a skill set you need to develop.
One of the things I've learned having to go and sell something completely different and new to what I'm used to is picking up themes. So potential clients in the new industry that I'm in, which is selling CRMs and AI automations, there's a theme of risk. So they're sitting across me and they feel that this is risky, and my vocabulary and my language then starts to wrap itself around making sure they understand that it's not a risk that they're taking. And then one of the ladies we were with a couple of weeks ago actually said out loud, okay, I feel safe. And that was really interesting language to me, because there was an element of, she obviously felt unsure about this, unsure about us, unsure about everything. And then it was like, no, okay, we can do this now. We can carry on. And that was a really good learning experience for me.
What you're highlighting there is two things. Again, the one is salespeople always are perceived as these sharky people who are coming to force me to part with my money. And so therein lies the one risk, is that what if I part with my money and I don't get what this person is selling to me? It makes me think of, whenever I go to the petrol station and put petrol and there's some guy selling me some cleaning product. Yes. And I'm like, I don't really want to buy this, but you're so adamant that I must buy it and I want to pay you so you can go away, kind of thing. In your case, the selling of a product that is so unknown and comes with, on the one hand, the potential to resolve a whole lot of pain points, but there's no trust, there's no, does this thing work? I don't even know what it is. It's something I've never heard about before. So using language that creates safety is really useful, but it's again recognizing what your product is and what it can offer and how unknown it is in the mind of the consumer and how much education is required, which means that your sales process needs a number of steps before the sale will take place. It means that you might need a long sales process. It's not just I meet with the person once, tell them about it once, and then they will buy. It might be that they've heard about it because of some social media post they've heard about it somewhere else, they've seen it on a billboard somewhere. There's multiple touch points where they've become more comfortable with the word, the language, the idea of the product. It's out there, it's been seen a number of times. Then they've heard their friend talk about it, and then they meet with you and you explain it some more, and then you give them time to go away and think about it. You send them some collateral that gives them a little bit more information. Then they hear of someone else who's used it and it's worked, and then perhaps they consider buying. So the sales process needs to have a number of steps that warms the customer up to what it is that they might buy. And it's recognizing that sometimes the sales process needs a lot of time between touch points until someone feels a level of comfort.
All businesses have different sales processes, so they all look different, and they can be, some are more complicated than others. So it's actually very, very varied. Yeah.
So just like we were saying, your physio business, most people now understand what a physio is. Maybe 30 or 40 years ago, that sales process would have looked different because it was perhaps not a known professional service. And so it's also taken time for the market to adopt the product as a known, trusted service. So physio is now a brand in and of itself that people know and trust. And so when someone, a GP, for example, refers someone to physio, it's most likely that they've heard about it, they trust their GP, the GP's got a good relationship. So the purchase is, the sales process is short because there's already a knowing around that product. It's like anyone knows there's no sales process required with selling white bread rolls at Spa, because everyone knows them. They just smell the smell and they go and buy it, as opposed to a product like a CRM, which is enormously useful, interestingly, even in scaling your sales process. But a lot of businesses don't know what that is. And so it's just an acronym that, no one even understands it. So going through a process of explaining even what a sales process is, that it's needed before someone buys a CRM, it's a long sales process.
So I think you've highlighted really nicely that sales processes should exist in businesses.
I think sales is such an underrated aspect of business, which is why I really wanted us to talk about it today, because I think it's a critical skill set within a business. And it's interesting that sales isn't really something that is recognized even as a profession. You know, marketing is seen as a profession. You know, you can go do a postgraduate diploma in marketing, you can do degrees in marketing, but I see very little even academic focus on sales. And even if you look at, you know, MBAs, there's not a lot of focus on sales even in an MBA program. So what's interesting to me is you become a master of business administration, but actually sales is such a fundamental part of being a business owner and running a successful business. And, you know, I see a lot of salespeople moving up in organizations purely based on their personality, because they naturally have an affinity towards being around people. They're really good communicators. So their personality is what leads them into sales. Whereas I think it's a profession. It's an extremely important professional part of running a business. So I guess I want to elevate it as an intellectual capability, and not just something that people kind of inherit and then learn how to do by accident or by experience, but that it's something that can be learned. And so there are actually a lot of resources out there, really, really experienced and successful salespeople who've written really good books. So learning sales is a critical competency of being a successful entrepreneur. Also because entrepreneurs generally are the ones that are doing the business development. They're usually the best at doing business development because they understand the context of the product or the service. They're generally specialists who've done the service for a number of years. Those people are generally very good at sales, but it's often the capability that they haven't developed. And so it's really just something to think about in becoming an entrepreneur or business owner, is how do I develop the skill set of a salesperson?
That's such a good point. I always tell everyone, do not underestimate salesmanship and the skill and the intellectual capabilities that you need to do it. Very good point.
I think another thing to add to that is that a lot of people come out of corporate wanting to start businesses, and even people who have run their own businesses for a long time because they are on the tools. They are the best electrician and they want to build their business because they want to earn more money. And so the transition from being a practitioner, a specialist, an employee to becoming a salesperson is often the most difficult transition. And it's where a lot of people fall out of the system. It's where business failure occurs, is at the point of transitioning from an identity point of view, from being a specialist and an operator to a salesperson. And so I'd want to really encourage people to find a way to make the bridge from being a specialist to developing the skill set of selling in order to grow the business, because that's where scale happens, is where you can sell more. It's where your multiplier effect happens, is through sales and marketing. And so if you're wanting to scale your business, the sales capability is what facilitates that. And that has to be something that is learned and developed, whether you learn it yourself or you're outsourcing it in some shape or form, but you have to know what's required to manage that really well. So often sales teams will be employed, but they're not managed well because the capability is still not a known capability within the business. And so learning and understanding sales is fundamental in your own identity shift as a business owner, and in terms of building and scaling a business.
Okay, so if I had to start tomorrow, if I said, okay, I need to work on my sales pitches and sales, everything, I would then either pick up a phone and start making cold calls, or I would start knocking on doors on a high street or main road and just start walking into shops and saying, my name's Caroline, do you have, and literally like, are you happy with your current software programs that you're using to scale your business? Something like that. So it would actually take, I'd have to identify one or two things and actually go ahead and do it 100 times. Is that right?
Yes, I think what you're saying brings to mind a really important part about sales is to rather think of yourself as a diagnostician as opposed to someone who's going in there to be a rep in a sense. So you're talking about going out there and cold calling or going to the high street and knocking on people's doors. The idea is to go in there and ask questions about what is going on for the person. So like a doctor would go, what are your symptoms? What's going on for you and how can I help you? And obviously from the position of what help you can provide. So the doctor isn't going to fix someone's teeth because he's not a dentist. He's going to ask questions related to how he can service and support the person. In exactly the same way you would be asking questions in your cold calling or in your door knocking process to go, where are the pain points in the business that I could potentially then service or solve? Just anecdotally, from your experience of starting with the sales process, what has it felt like to build a sales process? And how have you outworked that in your own business?
So very useful exercise. So again, I've experienced a short front end, or what I would call the front end of a sales process, which is getting the referral came to me quickly in my previous industry of healthcare, and then the sales process would happen after the first sale was made, of like, come back for more. And then I'm now experiencing a long runway, a long sale, a much more complicated and longer runway to actually getting that first sale. So just knowing what to do for my specific business, understanding that I need to be flexible about it and testing and measuring, and understanding that it is a skill. So I can only do so much, and that I probably should get a salesperson, professional salesperson in.
So that's an interesting point again, is realizing one's own capability and then going, I actually need a salesperson. And then how do we get that salesperson to the same level of passion? You believe in your product, you've built it, you know the need for it. So, even if we outsource the sales capability, we have to train that person in both the technical aspects of the product as well as the passion behind the sale. Why are we doing this? Why is it meaningful? And then again, having a process for that person to follow. And often business owners want to outsource the capability before they've developed the real understanding of the need and the system within the business.
Yeah. So it's uncomfortable for me. It's something I'm not good at. It's something I'm learning. I'm 100% prepared to go through that in order to understand what it takes to get a sale in this area. So that's why I'm starting. Like, I'm not a salesperson, but I feel like I need to understand the process in order to become really good at it. Mm-hmm. So that's just something that I'm prepared to do. And it is just one of those things that I have to do in my industry now.
It's inspiring to hear that you are so open to it and prepared to do the work. I've come across a number of business owners who really, really struggle to make that transition. So most business owners who struggle to grow their businesses is because they can't get off the tools to go and do the sales and marketing. And the irony is that activity actually generates more business than the being on the tools yourself. The challenge is to build a team that can do the actual work if it's a service-based business, or you have to have a factory that's producing the product. You're not making it yourself and then selling it too. So again, there's so many components to the sales process. It's intrinsically linked to having built a base for your business to grow from. And that includes having a product or a service that already has a kind of system involved in it. Your delivery of the product, there's a system around that. There's a financial structure that supports all of it. There's a long-term goal around this is what I am building before the sales process comes in. So again, it's not a linear process. This thing of running a business is so iterative. It goes forward and back and then forward and then back. And that's often what feels discouraging, because it's not like we're just, going up the ladder in one straight line. It really is one step forward, sometimes two steps back.
Yeah. So I would say there are probably 3 areas in entrepreneurship that require courage. I'd say the first is starting and putting yourself up there. So that's your first leap of being courageous. The second is sales, is like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to deal with the rejection and all that kind of stuff. And then the third one is decision making. It's tough to make decisions, difficult decisions with staff or money. And so I think sales is definitely one of the top 3 things that I would put there as being hard.
And it's the one area that you can build a skill set around. Starting, you can't build a skill set around starting, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
And so it requires a different kind of courage. But with sales, it really is a skill set. And so the more learning you apply to it and the more you practice it, the better you get. So it actually requires less courage if you do the learning.
Okay.
A lot of people try and do something without doing any learning around it. And so you learn by accident mostly. And that, I think, is more difficult.
Okay.
So that's why I think I want to emphasize the value of learning about sales, reading about it, studying it. And by doing that, you're already giving yourself an advantage, because the theory is already there, as opposed to just forcing yourself to go out there and just learn by making mistakes. That is obviously useful, but there's a lot of actual studying you can do. So we've talked a lot about the sales process today, but also all the ecosystem around sales. And I'm wondering what some of your key takeouts or thoughts are after today.
Definitely that it's something I can learn way more about. And so the learning comes, so for me, it's been mistakes. Make mistakes, figure it out by learning from it. But I think I'm going to be way more intentional in my targeting, learning about sales, and then not just reflecting on the mistakes I've made, but the more I do this, there will be good things coming out of it. So identifying the good things and understanding why they were good. So a lot of reflection, I think. So learning and reflection on what has happened from that learning.
For me, the critical thing is understanding that being in business is inextricably linked to sales, and not being deluded about that, not being in denial about that, not going into business without that consciousness that sales is a critical part of running a business. So if you're starting a business, I would say do all the learning you can about sales. And if you're in business already, think about how to systematize your sales process if it isn't in any kind of system. So what steps do you follow on a regular basis to get more customers? And if you don't have a sales process, do you even have a marketing machine that is constantly bringing new leads to your business? So that's, another conversation for another day, but really thinking about what is happening regularly in your business that brings customers to your door. And then once they're at your door, what are you doing to help them to purchase things or services that are going to help them so that they feel happy to purchase them again. And then if you're a successful business that already has a sales team, do you have a system like a CRM that is automating, making life easier? That is, systems do that. They give us more time. And so how do you scale your business by using technology, automations, and things like CRMs to really, I suppose, elevate your sales process and to monetize it even more? So those would be my 3 key things from today.